This podcast is part of the Batman Universe Podcast Network, hosted by the BatmanUniverse.net. Check out everything related to Batman and the entire Bat family at the BatmanUniverse.net, including news and original content related to comics, movies, television, merchandise, video games, and more. Also, check out some of the other unique podcasts that TBU has to offer. Consider supporting this podcast by becoming a patron on Patreon. Even $1 can go a long way in supporting this content that you enjoy. Look for a link over at the BatmanUniverse.net to offer your support now. And now, on with the show.
In 2008, a podcast was created with one goal: to bring Bat fans around the world news related to movies, comics, video games, television, merchandise, and so much more. And now, the Batman Universe Podcast has returned.
Hello everyone and welcome to the latest episode of the TBU podcast. I'm Dustin, and today we have a very special episode for you. Instead of a normal banter amongst the podcast hosts, Scott has an awesome interview with legendary producer, writer, and a number of other things, Michael Uslan, and he's going to be talking with him about a bunch of different things. So I'm going to throw it over to Scott, and let's take a listen.
This is Scott with the Batman Universe Podcast, and today we have a very special episode. Joining me is comic book fan and writer, university professor, movie producer, and Batman's Batman, Mr. Michael Uslan. For those who have probably seen his name in the opening credits of every Batman film since 1989, he's the man who bought the film rights to Batman and worked tirelessly to elevate the Caped Crusader into an even larger pop culture icon around the globe. He has 2 memoirs on the subject, The Boy Who Loved Batman, and most recently, Batman's Batman, the first of which is currently being adapted into a Broadway play called Darknights and Daydreams. How are you today?
I am jet lagged, but great. I just came from San Diego Comic-Con, and it really is the first big Comic-Con in 3 years. It was magical. It was wonderful, as always. Got to see a lot of old pals and meet a lot of new fans. And I love it, the way that fandom literally invades downtown San Diego and takes over the entire place. It's incredible stuff. After,
some time away from it, with it being shut down, everything, how was Comic-Con coming back to it?
It was great. It was a little bit different. Just a little bit different. There weren't quite as many people, I think, as usual. Which can be a good thing as well as a not so good thing. But there was a lot more taking place outside the convention center in different venues, and a lot of parties. So it was, it's still that fun social experience that it was for me when I went to the first Comic-Con when I was 13 in July 1965, where 200 fans, we were the first ones to get together and meet. And back then it wasn't about dealers selling old comic books and things. There were only like 4 dealers back then. They had their space in the ballroom, but for all the rest of us, we took a little blanket. We took a couple of gym bags filled with comic books. We'd sit down in a little spot. We'd spread out our comics and we would swap. And that's what the early Comic-Cons were really all about. So it's come a long way, and it's been great. This was my 58th annual Comic-Con, and I think Maggie Thompson is the only other one who can say that. But we're still standing, and we're still loving it, and we are still imparting comic book history to anyone who will listen.
It's kind of funny you went into that backstory, because one of my next questions was, in reading, The Boy Who Loved Batman, referencing that, how you talked about it, and before they were even called Comic-Cons. But comparatively, you started off like attending as a fan, and now you're a producer, you're someone who nurtures this environment, through your work. How does that feel, just coming from, both those places as a 13-year-old kid, loving comics, and now like kind of being a beacon of, fostering this environment?
Well, it's great because The Boy Who Loved Batman still exists. I'm still that passionate fanboy. I'm still buying comic books and artwork and going around to talk to artists and commissioning drawings and going to panels. So I'm still that fanboy. And I think one of the reasons that the fans have trusted me with Batman and other comic book projects I've been involved with, whether as a writer or as a producer, I think is that they know I'm one of them. And I am. I am not some Hollywood suit that walks out on a stage with something that a publicist has written for me or a teleprompter that I'm reading off of. It's all from the heart. And nothing beats that. Nothing beats that. I'm so privileged at this age to be doing what I love in life. And so it's not like work for me, but I feel a responsibility. I feel a responsibility not only to manage Batman's integrity, the darkness, the seriousness of Batman, but it's also about honoring the creators who were my mentors and friends, who during their lifetimes were often denigrated about being involved in comic books, which back then were accused of being the sole cause of the post-World War II rise of juvenile delinquency in America. And for many of my mentors, it's too late to be able to have them see what has happened here. But certainly for their kids and grandkids and great-grandkids, they're seeing the work hanging in museums and galleries and universities, and the respect that people have worldwide for comic books and the superheroes who are absolutely our modern day mythology. So I feel really, really great about that.
Awesome. Is there, every year, is there something in particular that you always look forward to, or do you have a favorite, Comic-Con, event or thing that, it's always kind of stuck with you?
Well, for me, number one is to find the panels and to find the booths that concentrate on comic books and on comic book history. Too often, Hollywood co-opts the spirit of Comic-Con and shifts the spotlight too much to stars, as opposed to the creators, to the people who gave us these characters and stories. And nothing should ever take away from the impact of people like Stan Lee and Jack Kirby and Steve Ditko and John Buscema and Roy Thomas. And I mean, I can make a list that goes on forever. On the DC side, editors like Julie Schwartz, writers like Denny O'Neil, Archie Goodwin, Neil Adams, for God's sake, Steve Englehart, Marshall Rogers, Bill Finger, Bob Haney, all these people that gave us so much. So having any opportunity to see their work either vibrant, being recounted with anecdotes or history in a way that spreads the word so that younger audiences don't forget these people and don't forget what got us here. That to me is the most important thing of all. I like when the spotlight is on comic books and comic book creators.
That's great to hear. And I think, as like all of us are, fans of, the medium, that's something, we always gravitate towards too, because these are the people who, created something and gifted it to the world that, we, celebrate and cherish and carry with us, I think, in a way, that's at least on my end too. It's always a motivating, things are tough or down, I do turn back to the page and, it always lifts my spirits and helps push through.
It's great. It's great when that happens. And that's the way it's supposed to be. It really is.
Jumping to your first memoir, The Boy Who Loved Batman,
yeah.
One of the things I loved about it was, it's the celebration of like the fantastical, anything is possible, realm of comic books, and this idea of finding, a way to pursue one's dreams, and you spent like the better part of a decade trying to get, the first Michael Keaton-led Bat film made. When you were going through the years between, when you bought the film rights to Batman and it finally being put in production, what kept you going? What motivated you?
Number one, first and foremost, is passion. I've never been in this for the money. And I can hear my agent kicking me under the table right now as I speak. But it's always been passion fueled for me. It's always been about protecting and defending Batman and protecting and defending the people who brought us Batman and the other characters. I understood I had responsibilities. I had a wife, my first house, which meant my first mortgage. I then had my first child, and I had obligations as a husband, as a parent, to take care of my family. And the economic strains and stresses during those 10 years, as I was trying to hold on by my fingertips to get to Batman, and that development hell just was incessant. It was like living for 10 years with a carrot dangling 1 inch in front of your nose that you can't grasp. And every time you move forward to grab it, it just moves that 1 more inch away. That was what my life was like. It was always so close, but never grabbable, not for 10 years. And, when you go through that, as I said in my book, it tests your mettle as a human being. You got to look deep inside yourself and say, okay, is everybody right? And I'm just being stubborn? Or do I really, truly believe in this? Do I really, truly believe in myself? And I kept coming up with the second answer. So what my brother Paul and I learned from my mom is that when you make a commitment, you honor it. It's a matter of honor, and you persevere. And as my mom used to say, sometimes that'll mean you'll have to experience pain, but that's what goes along with it. It's not easy. It's not quick. And you have to be willing to bear it in order to honor your commitment. And that's what I was forced to do. That's what I had to do for so long. And with everybody telling me, your idea sucks. It's the worst idea we ever heard. A dark and serious comic book superhero movie. Get out of here, kid. That's every single studio, every single mini major turned me down. I heard that from everybody. I was crazy, period, end of story. But I knew I wasn't. And one of the questions I get asked most these days, did you ever anticipate, could you ever imagine how successful this would be, how it would pervade the world culture, how it would change Hollywood forever, change the comic book industry, change the world's perception of superheroes and supervillains in comic books? And I sit here and go, yeah, I did. I never doubted it for a second from the beginning. This is always what I envisioned. But just the fact that as a kid in my 20s, that I raised money and bought the rights to Batman is the most impossible, inconceivable story I could tell now. Because unless you go back and set it in the context of the times, it's like, oh, that couldn't happen. It just couldn't happen, but it did. And the unglamorous answer to it all as to how it happened is very simple. I was the only one on the planet Earth who showed up. That's how I got the rights to Batman. That's it.
It's a good way to put it. And yeah, you're right. I don't think that would ever happen again. I feel like IP, just watching as a viewer, it seems like, a lot of, studios sometimes try to go through different IPs that aren't used and just test the waters and see if there's something there. And, they're more, I guess, cognizant of it now.
Oh, a little bit more. I would say right now, if you wanted to get the rights to the Green Glob, that was a tiny backup feature in Unexpected at DC Comics for a few issues, they'd probably want $1 million up front. This is the way things have changed.
Huh. Something else, I loved about The Boy Who Loved Batman is, kind of serves this, dual purpose of, a bit of a history lesson in comics and how the medium has evolved and inspired, so much since then, and, what you've just talked about. But one of the stories I wanted to touch on, it was a smaller story, kind of, buried in there. But it was, when you talked about meeting director Sam Raimi, and the reason why I wanted to bring that up is, what I loved about that story was, him meeting you at a Comic-Con many years prior, as just a fan of your work. And correct me if I'm wrong, but it was on The Shadow, I believe.
Correct.
And I like, that story because it kind of resonates with this idea of how, our actions and accomplishments, they can echo. And so have you had many experiences like that, either as a fan of something yourself or in having other creative people in Hollywood come up to you and tell you, how you've inspired them?
Oh, my God. The older I get, the more often it happens. It's like cosmic. It's absolutely cosmic. I was walking down Hollywood Boulevard one day. I had parked the car and was heading to meet my wife for lunch with some people. And I'm walking down Hollywood Boulevard and somebody walks by me and they go, Michael? And I turn around. I go, yes. And you don't remember me, but I was in the first class you taught. And your class gave me the confidence I needed to move from a small town in Indiana to Hollywood and take my shot. And now I'm vice president of this big media company and blah, blah, blah. And it wouldn't have happened without you. I mean, yeah, and that's been happening more often. There was one night my wife and I went to a Broadway play and we got out. It was very late and we were parked at the Port Authority, which back then was like, taking your life into your hands to walk through the Port Authority, take the elevator up and walk to your car. The good old 70s and 80s of New York Times Square area. And so we get on, it's like midnight. We get on this elevator and a guy gets on at the last second. There's three of us and he's staring at me. So I'm thinking, oh God, we're in trouble. Something really, really bad is about to happen. And he goes, are you Michael Uslan? And my first response was, are you with the IRS? Who are you? And he said, I'm just a fan. I go, well, how did you know who I am? I stay behind the camera. He goes, oh no, I have every DVD with, or it might even have been video cassettes back then. I have everyone with all the special features and I've seen you on these documentaries and, can I have your autograph? And, at midnight in an elevator in the Port Authority in New York City, it was just kind of strange. But this kind of stuff happens more and more, especially now with, first of all, everybody in the business is younger now, as far as I'm concerned. And with young people coming up who have either read my stuff, seen my films, in some cases, they've heard me lecture and or they've read my book and it's inspired them to do something. And, they say, boy, if it wasn't for you or if it wasn't for your words, I might not be doing this. And it's a wonderful thing. It's what I call now, this is my legacy years. And hearing things like that literally validate for me the 10-year human endurance struggle that I had to get a dark and serious Batman on the movie screen. So it's very, very important to me. And I would say the last thing, and the one that gets me the most right in the gut, right in the heart, I hear a lot these days from people, from fans who said, Batman 1989 changed my life. The Dark Knight changed my life. Back in 1989, my dad took me to see the Batman movie. I was 7. Or my grandpa took me to see the Batman movie, and they're gone now. But I have this great, great memory that I will never forget of those hours sitting with them and watching Batman for the first time. I mean, it makes everything all worthwhile.
It's a beautiful thing. That is. And I feel like, a lot of people I talk to, we all have our own stories, and it's, that is a beautiful thing. It's actually kind of funny too, because I went to pick up Laotian food not like the other week, and I walked in and it's a family run business, but they're all sitting around at the table by the register watching Batman 1989 on TV. So I walked in and I go, hey, and it was the scene where Joker fries that guy with the hand buzzer, the joy buzzer. So first thing I hear walking in to pick up our order, but it was pretty funny. But yeah, no, I have those memories like that too. And, Batman was my introduction to, I was born in 87. So my introduction to the character, to comics, to everything, it was kind of the launching, piece of work that, turned me towards, comics.
It's great to hear. And the Broadway play that we're doing with the Niederlander organization, which is incredibly exciting. It's to reach out to you and to everybody like you and me. It's not that the play's about me, the boy who loved Batman. It's about every boy who loved Batman, every girl who loved Batman, every person who loved Batman. We can all relate to our own stories. There's such a commonality that we all share, a warm and fuzzy bond over our love for comics and superheroes and animation and TV and movies. And And that's an amazing thing. So hopefully when they come to see the play, it's going to be, wow, this could have been my story. This is about my passions. This is about my alienation because of my choice of hobby that became my passion, and finding community finally, whether it's through comic book conventions or social media or just going to a superhero movie that's filled with people who share the love. It's an incredible thing. And it really is about finding your passion and finding your community.
On the topic of, the play, how is production coming along, and is there, a rough date on when, we could see it?
Well, we just announced it this past Saturday night at San Diego Comic-Con. And we now have our director. We have the writer who is now writing the final version of the play. The Nederlanders are amazing. Between the Nederlanders and the Schuberts, they are Broadway. Period. End of story. So we're with the top organization. Everybody gets it. Everybody understands what we're trying to do here. And a target, yeah, I would say, maybe the target is for Christmas holidays of 2023. It would open earlier in a regional theater in a pre-Broadway run, but it remains to be seen. Everything's got to go right when it comes to casting, which is surrealistic for me. It's going to be subject to the availability of particular stars. So, or actors, and, we just have to go that way. But, the target is maybe around the end of 2023.
Okay, cool. And then, you just mentioned how casting would be kind of surreal for you. Are you, paying closer attention to that, or is that?
Not only am I paying close attention, my wife is paying close attention to it, because she also has to be cast, and my parents have to be cast, and my brother, and wow. It's really something. I was sitting in a creative meeting a couple of weeks ago with everybody, and I'm sitting there and I go, now wait a minute, I don't think 10-year-old Michael would say that or would say it that way. And then I go, holy moly, I'm talking about myself in the third person. This is weird. This is really weird, but it is incredible amount of fun.
That's awesome. I'm looking forward to it. I wanted to jump to Batman 89 for a moment, just because, it feels like, we're kind of in a renaissance of that era right now. We just had a comic miniseries, and then Michael Keaton is suiting up for the Flash and Batgirl. Is there anything, fans of that movie should brace themselves for, coming out in the next year or so? And I know there's an anniversary coming up too.
Yeah, they should brace themselves for seeing one of their oldest and best friends or family members that they haven't seen in a long, long, long time. And there will be a lot of metaphysical hugging and tears of joy. I think it is an incredible opportunity for all of us who were ever touched by the work of Michael Keaton and the breakthrough revolutionary nature of the Batman 1989 movie that changed everything for us fans and led to our superheroes and our comic books being treated seriously for the first time. So it is going to be warm and fuzzy, and it's just going to be like, slipping into a pair of old comfy slippers. It's just going to be great.
I'm going to ask you to put your producer hat on for a second. And, something that I was thinking about is, for a while we only really saw, one on-screen depiction of Batman at a time, but now, the world's different. That doorway is open. Currently we have Ben Affleck, Michael Keaton, and Robert Pattinson, in live action movies. And Keanu Reeves is lending his voice in to Batman and DC League of Super Pets. So, and I'm looking forward to that and enjoying that. I know other members of our site are, but is there a reason why we're seeing so many different Batmen at one time?
Well, I think the world has changed, and I think the nature of entertainment has changed. I remember taking 12 people to see Watchmen when it opened in theaters. And except for me and my wife Nancy, we were the only two that had read the graphic novel and that were into comics. And there were the two of us who were enthralled with what we were seeing, and 10 other people who were completely lost in the opening few minutes because they could not even begin to grasp that in two different time periods, there were two different superhero groups representing different generations. They couldn't even get their hands wrapped around that or their heads. So they were lost for the rest of the 3 hours. But today it's different. I mean, I don't think you can watch a Marvel movie without a flow chart.
Yeah.
I don't know how you could possibly do it. And there's so much detail, so much backstory, so much continuity. It's incredible to me that people can follow it, but they do. So I think with Flash opening up the DC multiverse and Doctor Strange opening up the Marvel multiverse, you now have an audience that's equipped to grasp it and process it. It's a sea change. It really is a sea change. And it's doing nothing different than the comics have done over the last 80, 85 years. I mean, there have been different versions of Batman in the comic books themselves that range from one extreme to the other. So you could have the real dark, serious, menacing Batman of the late 1930s, early 40s. You can have the almost vampiric Batman of the 1990s. You can have the darkly romantic Batman of Marshall Rogers' era. You could have the robot Batman, the zebra Batman, the genie Batman of kind of the era I grew up with in the 50s and early 60s. There's so many different interpretations, Frank Miller's. And now I think the world is diverse enough and the audiences are diverse enough that you can have many different interpretations of Batman out there, and each person can seek his or her own true Batman. So you can watch Lego Batman, but unlike the 60s TV show, you're not laughing at Batman. You're laughing with Batman. You can have Batman meets Scooby-Doo, an animated feature. You can have the Batman as dark, like coming right out of Silence of the Lambs or Zodiac. You could have Joker as a one-off that pulls audiences in because it is cinema at its best, showing us like a mirror that we don't want to look into what has happened to us, as individuals, as a country, as a civilization, where we've lost our civility with each other. We don't talk to each other. We talk at each other. We ignore issues of mental health. And if you ignore mental health, that's tied to gun violence. And for a movie like Joker to put that right out there, I mean, this is incredible stuff that's taking place. Chris Nolan, the Dark Knight trilogy, elevated what everybody used to describe as a comic book movie, but today can describe as great films. So I embrace and welcome all of it. And now I embrace the Batman 1966 TV series because it is no longer the one and only sole image of Batman the world has. It's not Batman doing the Bat-2-seat and looking for a place to put a bomb and bat shark repellent. It's what it is a mechanism to bring young kids into the world of Batman and Gotham City, that they can grow up and mature and graduate into the animation, graduate into the movies and the video games. So I think it's all very, very important part of the whole thing as it grows. There is a Gotham universe. There is a Bruce Wayne universe out there. And these are all valid interpretations.
That was a great answer. I know we have a hard stop, so I have one more question and then I'll wrap things up, if you don't mind. What's on your pull list this day? I know you mentioned these days. I know you mentioned you still read comics, so I was just curious what your pull list looks like.
It is all over the map. Number one, being the guy I am, I spend more money buying Masterworks, Archives, Omnibus, trades. I love collecting the old stuff and then collecting completed story arcs of new stuff that I want to follow. There's a lot of great writers out there. Maybe this is the biggest sea change. I tend now to follow writers more than artists. And I think when I was a kid, I followed artists primarily. So if there was a book that Neil Adams drew or Jack Kirby drew, I was there. But now I think I gravitate to writers, whether it's Snyder, King, Spencer, Gail Simone. I hate to leave anybody out. So there's just bunches of writers that I really enjoy their work in particular. So I'd have to say I'm all over the map. I love the nostalgic stuff. I love the Batman '89 and Superman '78 minis that DC did. What I don't like is when characters I grew up with and have stuck with for years no longer look or sound or act the way they used to. If it's a violation of the integrity of a character, I cash in my chips. I said, this is not my generational character. This is for some other maybe younger person. Mine is dead. Mine's gone. And that's when I stop reading or collecting a particular character.
Okay. Well, that's fair, and that's, I love, your focus on writers too, because that's, something, I follow a lot too. I'm a big fan of, King, especially, Tom King too lately. I've been reading a lot of his work, and obviously Scott Snyder had a big imprint on Batman, and it's, but, it's, you could see how, working in tandem, how they really can elevate the playing field when you have a great artist and you have a writer who wants to, get a little literary with it or, throw people through a loop.
It's really true. I even stopped. Do you remember Richie Rich?
I mean, I've never read Richie Rich, but I know of him. And there actually is someone created an indie comic. I can't remember what it's called, but they replaced Richie Rich with Donald Trump. It's Ronald Rump, I believe, actually is the name of the comic.
Yeah, I stopped reading and collecting Richie Rich when I realized he was Donald Trump in short pants. That was an eye opener. That was not the character I knew when I was 5 and 6. My Archie is different than Riverdale's Archie. It's a generational shift. I don't say that's wrong or that's bad. I say that's great for younger people today to be able to gravitate and make Archie relevant to them. But my Archie is still, hanging out at Pop Tate's Malt Shop after school. So again, it's a generational thing.
Yeah, he's a little more Twin Peaks now.
Yes, definitely. And great. Let the younger audiences have that. And as long as the comic book company still gives me classic Archie, we're cool.
Jumping off, I want to wrap up this episode by, thanking you for your time and answering my questions. It was an absolute pleasure to get to chat with you. You're a personal hero of mine, as I mentioned earlier. And it was, your dedication to bringing Batman to the screen that, like I also mentioned, turned me on to the character and sparked my interest in comics. And, I know I'm not alone in that, as we talked about. For our listeners, you can purchase, Michael Uslan's memoirs, The Boy Who Loved Batman and Batman's Batman at the links below. And I really hope you enjoyed this episode.
Well, I have loved it. I've loved spending time with you and working with somebody who is so knowledgeable and so passionate about what I am passionate about. I don't always get that in every interview. So I thank you for that. I'll also plug, because Stanley always told me, Michael, make sure you get in the plugs. I now have audiobook versions of both of my memoirs, which I don't even know what the right word is, narrated.
I think there's an art to it now. It's,
I would say so. So I could now literally read you to sleep at night, everybody. So that's been fun as well. What I would like to do is come back and do a part 2 with you. There's going to be some real interesting announcements coming up over the next few months. And at the right moment, when you think we've got some really good stuff to talk about, let's get together again and we'll do this one more time.
Absolutely. I would love that.
All right, and with that concludes the interview that Scott did with Michael Uslan. Thanks to Michael Uslan for taking the time to talk with us and share a little bit of information that us Bat fans may have not known. Hopefully, as Michael hinted at, we will be having him on for a part 2 in the future. But in addition to that, we're also planning on doing a lot of other interviews, unique things to kind of fill in some of the time when we don't have a lot of news interviews and huge topics to discuss. So with that, expect a lot more interviews in the near future from this podcast, and we'll be producing those on a pretty semi-regular basis. And with that, that's going to wrap up this episode of the TBU podcast. Thank you so much for listening. If you are interested in finding out news related to movies, television, video games, merchandise, comics, or anything else related to the Bat fandom, be sure to check out our website, thebatmanuniverse.net, which has all kinds of news, original content, and other podcasts related to the Bat family. You can follow us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. We are on Discord. You can find all of our social links over on the website at the top of the page. In addition to that, you can send us an email at tbu@thebatmanuniverse.net with any questions, comments, concerns, or suggestions of things you'd like to see or hear us discuss on future episodes. Outside of that, again, thank you so much to Michael Uslan. Thank you to Scott for taking care of the interview. And for everybody at the TBU podcast, we will see you guys next time.